Today I'd like to speak about a young girl, a 19-year-old girl known as the Weaver's daughter. This is a young woman who lived in the time of the Buddha. She lived in the city of Alui, which is in India. When she was 16 years old, the Buddha came to her city and he gave a talk. He instructed the people there in the meditation on the fact of death. So the reflection on death, I will recite the Pali and just say to you what it means. Aduang me jivitang, duang me maranang, awasang maya marita bimewa, marana pariyosana me jivitang, marana jivitamewa aniyatang, marana niyatang. So it means my life is not lasting. Sorry, my death is lasting, but my life is not lasting. My death is inevitable. My life will end in death. Life is uncertain. Death is certain. The reason for the Buddha teaching this is because people who don't have the awareness of death, when they face their death, they're frightened. Like a person who sees a snake, a poisonous snake, but doesn't have any stick with which to toss it away. But a person who has the awareness of death, they see the snake from a distance. They see it when it's still far away. They can grab a stick. They can take the snake with a stick and toss it away. Of course, you may not have this experience. Living where you do, snakes may not be very numerous, so you never had to do this. But in Asia, this is quite common. So please repeat after me. My life is not lasting. My death is lasting. Inevitable is my death.
Inevitable is my death.
My life will end in death.
My life will end in death.
My life is uncertain.
My life is uncertain.
My death is certain.
My death is certain.
My life is not lasting.
My life is not lasting.
My death is lasting.
My death is lasting.
Inevitable is my death.
Inevitable is my death.
My life will end in death.
My life will end in death.
My life is uncertain.
My life is uncertain.
My death is certain.
My death is certain.
Okay. So this young weaver's daughter, when she was 16, she heard this teaching by the Buddha, and she was very impressed by the power of the Buddha. And so from that day onwards, she always kept this reflection in mind as she went about her day. And she did like this for 3 years. So one day at dawn, the Buddha was surveying the world, as he always did. And that day he saw her in his mind's eye, and he reflected on what was the cause that she appeared in his eye like that. And he realized that she had been practicing this teaching for 3 years, since the time he had come to her town. And he realized that if he went there that day, he would ask her some questions. And then he would teach a verse, and at the end of it, she would realize Nibbana. And also, it would be very beneficial. So And he also saw that she would die that day. So it was very important for him to go there. So the Buddha went with his monks to the Alui monastery in the town. And the villagers, the townspeople, saw that he had arrived and invited him to come to a food offering and give a sermon. So, and the weaver's daughter also, she heard that he was, she wanted to see him very much. She felt like he is her father. But it happened that as she was, although she also wanted to go to hear the Buddha, her father was weaving. And he had a need for some thread. He needed to finish the robe that he was working on, and for that he needed some more thread. So he asked her to go to the storage place and get some thread for him. And there she was faced with the situation of what to do. Should I go to see the Buddha now, or should I get the thread for my father? And when she thought about it, she said to herself, I'd better go get the thread for my father first, because if I don't get it, he's likely to beat me. So I will get the thread first, and then I will go see the Buddha. So she went to the place where she could get the thread and put it in her basket, and was on her way back to her father's weaving place when she passed by the place where the Buddha had just been offered his lunch and had finished. He was sitting silently. So the Buddha had finished his meal, but he hadn't started to give any Dhamma talk. Usually at the end of the meal there's a talk rejoicing in the good deed done of offering the food. But he was sitting silently. And the girl was passing by. She looked and she saw him sitting there. And he looked at her. And when he looked at her, she understood that it would be better if she listens to the talk first and then goes to take the thread to her father. So she came into the crowd and she paid respects to the Buddha and sat down. So as soon as she had sat down, the Buddha began to ask her some questions. He said, "My daughter, where do you come from?" She replied, "I don't know, Venerable Sir." Then he asked her, "Where are you going?" And again she replied, "I don't know, Venerable Sir." Then he asked her, "Don't you know?" She replied, "Yes, I do know, Venerable Sir." Then he asked, "Do you really know?" And she replied, "No, I don't know, Venerable Sir." Okay, so 4 questions and 4 answers. Where are you going? I don't know, Venerable Sir. Sorry, where do you come from? Was the first one. She said, "I don't know." And the second one, where are you going? She said, "I don't know." Then the third one, he asked her, "Don't you know?" And she said, "I do know." And then the fourth one, "Do you really know?" "No, I don't know." So the audience, when they heard this, they were very critical. They said, "Look at that girl. She's just saying this and that, whatever she likes when she's speaking to the Buddha. Shouldn't she say, 'I come from the weaving house. I'm going to the weaving shed'?" She should say what she's really doing. But the Buddha made the crowd be silent, and then he asked her to explain. He said, "When I asked you, where are you coming from? Why did you say, 'I don't know'?" And she replied to the Buddha, Well, I'm carrying this basket of spool. The Buddha can see that I'm carrying the thread, and he knows. I've come from the weaving to the weaving house. That's where we get the thread. So he doesn't mean, where do I come from in that worldly sense? He means, where did I come from before I was born in this existence? So I answered, I don't know. I don't know what lifetime I had before. Was I an animal? Was I a man? Was I a woman? Where was I? I don't know. And the Buddha said, well said, well said. You have answered my very question. Then the Buddha asked, when I asked you, where are you going? Why did you say, I don't know? And she replied, Venerable Sir, you know that I'm going to take these threads to my father. You can see that I have the threads, so that is where I am going, to the weaving shed. So I know you don't mean that. I understood that you mean, after this lifetime, where will I go? Where will I be reborn? I don't know, Venerable Sir. That's why I answered this way. And the Buddha said again, well said, well said. You have answered my very question. Then he asked her, when I asked you, don't you really know? Why did you say, I know? And she replied, Venerable Sir, I know that I will die. That's why I said, I do know. And he again approved of her answer in the same way, saying, well said, well said. You have answered my very question. And then finally he asked her, when I asked you, don't you know, why did you say, when I asked you, do you know, do you really know, why did you say that you don't know? And she said, well, although I know that I will die, I don't know when. I don't know whether I will die in the evening, in the morning, what time of day. All these things. I don't know about my time of death. I know that I will die, but I don't know about the time of death. And so again, he said, well said, well said. You have answered my very question. And I recited this verse, Anta Bhuto, Ayang Loko, Tanu Keta Vipasati, Sakuno Jalamoto Wa, Apo Sagaya Gachati. And that means this world, the people, that is, the people of this world, are as though they are blind. They don't have the eye of wisdom, that means. There are few who see clearly in terms of the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless quality of our experience, the things that we really, the true nature of our experience, they don't see with the eye of Vipassana. Just as only a few birds escape the hunter's net, so too, of all the beings caught in the net of death, very few go to the celestial realms or realize Nibbana. And when the Buddha finished his teaching, the young weaver's daughter realized Nibbana. So the reason why I thought this would be a good story to tell you about, there are two things. One is, this girl is like us because we don't have time. We have to work. So we have just a short time to practice. We don't have extended periods of time right now. You're coming from your daily lives and taking this, about 2 full days to practice meditation. And she had to work for her father, and she only had a little bit of time to apply to the practice. So in those times, in that 3 years where she was practicing, although she was reflecting on the teaching that she had heard from the Buddha, she didn't have a chance to gain momentum during that time. It was only when she came to sit in front of the Buddha and then listen to his teaching again that she could develop the momentum needed to develop concentration and wisdom and realize Nibbana. So in your daily life, if you do daily sitting to some extent, then that kind of keeps your practice alive when you're not on retreat. And then when you come on retreat like this, you have a chance to build up continuity, because your only task at the retreat is to just do sitting meditation when you're sitting, walking when you're walking, and then develop awareness during your daily activities of eating and bathing and so on, so that you can develop continuity of awareness, so that you can develop concentration and mindfulness more and more. So it's very helpful to come to a place like this so that you can develop continuity and power in your practice. And then the other aspect of this talk is the teaching on the reflection of death, which is very, very helpful. Because as all of you are finding out, as you've done many sittings now since the time I saw you last, you probably are starting to experience pain. That doesn't show up at first when we practice, but only when the mind starts to get concentrated do we start to feel some pain and discomfort. And when we understand that we can die at any moment, then it's very helpful when we have to face these pains in the sitting or in the walking, whatever we happen to be doing when they occur, because we understand, well, this is something I can face. And just like we want to be able to face our death bravely, we can practice facing pain when we do this practice. So if we develop the ability to be aware of uncomfortable sensations in this setting of meditation practice, is very, very helpful, because when we actually do face difficult diseases or circumstances or even the moment of our death, we will be prepared to observe the feelings instead of becoming alarmed. So this is a capability that we really should try to develop before we need it, so that we know, so that we have this tool to use when the time comes, when there's a crisis, when we have a health crisis, or when we're facing death. So I'd like to ask if there are any questions about the practice or about anything that I've said. Did she die that day? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, she did. She went back to the weaving shed where her father was. And because he was waiting for her for a while, he had fallen asleep at the loom. And she didn't notice that he was asleep. So she went in, and she happened to, she held out the basket to him. And it happened to hit, I'm not very good on the terminology of the loom and the different parts. But she held out the basket to him, but of course he was asleep, so he couldn't take it. And the basket hit part of the loom and dropped. So when the basket dropped on the floor, it made a big sound, and her father woke up all of a sudden, and he released the shuttle, and it stabbed her in the chest, and she died. I'm not sure if Marie Cecile probably knows the terminology, but I don't know the part of the loom that all of a sudden flew, and then it must have had a sharp point So it pierced her in the chest, and she died right there. And of course, he was very distressed. And he went to the Buddha at that time and told him what had happened. And the Buddha consoled him by saying, the tears that he has shed over the life of that girl throughout samsara are greater than the waters of all the 4 oceans. This has happened before, that he's cried over the death of that daughter. And he also took up meditation, and he became an arahant.
How can you could possibly explain the uprooting the layers of past lives or these latents that we're supposed to have? Can you relate with this story? I don't know if...
It's not necessary to remember our past lives.
Not to remember, but how can, if the story repeats itself in a different way, what can we learn about it?
Do you mean what can we learn from our lifetime?
Yeah.
Yeah. If we have to live one lifetime after another. Yeah. We can, when we practice meditation, when we practice Vipassana meditation in particular, we develop wisdom. And when we develop enough wisdom, that wisdom stays with us throughout our future existences, so that we don't live the same story over and over again, because we learn and we keep that knowledge. So we develop, through our efforts to observe what's happening in us, our body, our breathing, our walking, our ability to see becomes more and more refined, so that we come to see the elemental, the elements that are part of our existence, and we can see how they really are. We don't see it with the eye of ignorance anymore. We see it with the eye of wisdom. So everything that we experience has the nature to arise and pass away. Because it doesn't last, because of this quality of arising and passing away, it's oppressive. It's not satisfactory. Anything that is good that we experience doesn't stay that way. We can't hold on to it. And it does this of its own accord. It's not a process that we can if it were something that we owned, like for example, I have €5, I can use that €5 to get something. Okay? But that means I own those €5, right? And I own what I can get with that €5. But our minds and bodies aren't like that. We don't own them. We can't command them. We can't make them be healthy. We can only try to keep them from falling apart quickly. We can't really keep them. We can't prevent our death in the end. So for these reasons, it's but most people don't see it that way. People think that their lives, are just, they're the same person going from young to old, and this is going to last forever. When their body finally falls apart, they get really distressed. So we can develop wisdom through the practice, and when that realization, when a person realizes Nibbana in the first stage, that realization stays with you from one lifetime to the next, so you don't go back to being ignorant. and you understand about the practice of Vipassana, of being aware of your body, of your mind. So eventually, this knowledge to complete fruition with the end of the samsaric story. That is, a person who realizes arahantship doesn't have any future lifetimes. Does that answer your question? Okay. I hope you keep on practicing.
Is there a reason, Siali, why the yogi should sit crossed legs?
No, the only thing is, it doesn't have to be cross-legged. The yogi should sit in a position where they can keep their back upright and they can keep still for an hour. So it should be a position where they aren't so uncomfortable that they have to change before the hour is up. So if, the legs will have to be bent somehow, but they don't necessarily have to be crossed. And the Burmese have a way of sitting with one leg in front of the other. They don't sit in either the half lotus or the full lotus. Some people sit with their feet behind them. Or use a bench, of course. But when we're sitting, whether it's in a chair or on the floor, the legs will be bent somehow. So it just should be a stable position. So at this point, this retreat is so short that you just have a chance to experience a lot of pain, but you don't have a chance to get past it in general. So if you need to, if the pain becomes unbearable, as you're doing the sitting meditation, we try to keep the main object. We observe the main object of the rising and the falling and the other objects when they become prominent. So when pain becomes prominent, we don't have to keep on observing the rising, falling. We should observe the pain. And as our concentration gets stronger and stronger, it will also seem like the pain is worse and worse. So before the concentration becomes strong enough. So if, as we are observing the pain, it becomes unbearable, then we can change the position, but we have to do so without losing our awareness. So the continuity of awareness is very important. So we need to observe the pain. Then when we feel the desire to move, we have to note that desire to change. And if the pain is very strong, that desire will probably persist. So then we make the decision to move. We have to observe that. And then observe the movements that we make in order to get to a new position. And then resume back as usual to observe the rising and falling of the abdomen. So now I think you've been sitting for more than an hour, and if there are no more questions, I'd just like to say very briefly a few things.
Donc maintenant, France, ça fait déjà plus d'une heure que
but I see it looks like there might be a question in the back. I don't know.
I think there are lots of questions.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Ceux qui veulent poser des questions peuvent venir ici devant, la poser directement à Sayali.
Hello, Sayali. This is Sarah.
Hello.
I was wondering between can we unlearn from not practicing every day from
yes.
Yeah,
yes,
this is my question.
Yes, we can. Everyone should practice it. At least Mahasi Sayadaw said like this, if you practice an hour a day, at home, and also keep the 5 precepts. Yes, you can. People practice in their daily life and develop very high knowledge. It's possible. So, but the thing is the continuity, and also to try to keep the mind from being unwholesome. It's the the unwholesome things that really interrupt the practice. So in daily practice, in daily life, walking is very helpful. The ability to be aware of your, when you walk from one place to another, to be able to keep the awareness of the body, to be aware of the standing posture when you find yourself standing, or sitting when you find yourself sitting, or lying down. So to keep a good awareness of the postures, and then to do sitting, and if possible precede the sitting with a walking period of at least 10 minutes before you. It's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, I am Virginie. Nice to meet you. Maybe back on the topic of death. Thank you for the story. And I had a question because the translator ended saying when people reaching nirvana, well, there's nothing afterwards. It's the end. Il y a plus de vie, vous avez dit. And my question was, what happens once we reach nirvana?
No, well, I think he was talking about when.
Sorry?
What I think the point was that after we realize Nibbana, we still have to finish off our lifetimes. Okay, so, but when a person reaches arahantship, there's no more cause for another life to happen. So an arahant continues to live through the present existence, but they don't get reborn. So after that, there's death, and then, there's nothing further reborn. So there's no more new lifetimes.
So there's no more humanship, but is there other forms of something?
No, to be, there are 31 planes of existence according to the Buddhist theory. And if there is no cause for rebirth, then you won't be born in any one of those planes. As long as there is a cause for rebirth to happen, there can be rebirth into various types of existence. So it's not like there's nothing. It's like the fire becomes extinguished. So when a person realizes arahantship, eventually that existence comes to an end. It's like what would happen to a fire if you stopped putting fuel on the fire? It would just burn out, and it would eventually become cool. So it's similar to that. It's just that fuel is not being added to keep the fire going. Do you understand?
Well, I don't know how close you can see my face, but it looks confused.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't see it. Yeah, I don't know how to make the screen in the hall larger, so everybody looks pretty small. So I can't see your face. So, okay. What's confusing about it? The idea that after you realize Nibbana, then?
I guess I'm not that confused about reaching a certain amount of plans you said, and then not reincarnating one of these plans.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more, is there some sort of energy left? The idea of the fire, maybe, or the memory of the fire, is that something that stays or can be felt in a way that's not tangible?
Okay, if there's no, okay. I suppose that you could say, we understand about the Buddha. The Buddha passed away completely. He didn't get reborn. But we know about him, and we know about him from the teachings. So there is that memory, and there's the ability to realize the Dhamma that he taught, because the Dhamma is still in existence, because people practice it. So in that way, there is still, you could say, there's the memory of what existed. People are still able to learn about the Dhamma and practice it. So I hope that answers your question, but I don't know if it does. You're welcome.
Hi, Zele. I'm Mahima. I had just a really practical question.
Yes.
How are we supposed to practice about the teaching you gave us today? Because right now we are practicing a lot about concentrating on our breathing, on our walking. So how should we integrate the teaching you gave us to, for example, the one of the weekend?
You can, I think it's good to do, in the morning, just reflect on those phrases. You can do it for, a few minutes in the morning or in the evening.
Okay.
It's not, since the main thing is to, especially during this retreat, when you're on retreat, you should try to develop awareness as much as possible. But this meditation on death is a protective meditation. So it's good to do it. You can do it every day for a few minutes, just to remind yourself.
Thank you. Can we have a last question here,
Yes,
please?
Yes.
Thank you. My question is about the walking meditation. And the question is, how can I practice labeling properly? So when I do walking, do I observe the movement of the body and then labeling them? Or sometimes I see I have a thought of stopping and then my body stops. So do I watch the move and the thought at the same time? Or could you explain a little more? Thank you.
Sure. So when you are making steps, you keep your awareness on the leg, and if possible, to make the label of, right step, left step, but if you're aware of a thought, the thought is probably gone before you have a chance to note it. There's a thought and then you stop. So you knew that the thought happened. The primary thing is to know what is happening. So you were aware of the thought and then there was the stopping. So then just put your attention on the stopping, that the body is standing there, and note the stopping. You don't need to note the thinking that has already passed by. So don't try to be aware of two things at the same time. Does that answer your question? So regarding daily activities, I would just like to say that the walking meditation is very helpful for helping us to bring our awareness into what we're doing when we're not sitting. So, but for now, during the sitting periods, try to apply the instructions for the sitting. During the walking periods, try to take the full time. Don't shortchange the walking period. Try to do a full walking. Of course, sometimes you have to do things like use the toilet or whatever. But try to make sure you get a good walking period in every time. Then be aware of your standing. Before you sit down on the cushion and after you stand up, after sitting, Bring your attention to the standing posture. Observe the whole standing. And then also remember to observe when you end the day, as you go to your bed, you sit down on the edge of the bed, and lie down. Be aware of the different postures that you're in. Standing, and then sitting, and then lying. When you're lying in bed, observe the rising and falling of the abdomen until you fall asleep. When you wake up in the morning, try to begin your awareness as soon as you wake up. So if you aren't aware of the moment of waking up, then as soon as you're awake, put your attention on the abdomen to observe the breathing a few times before you begin to move about. So try always to bring yourself back to, as you go about the day, you may be doing something while you're sitting, you may be doing something while you're standing or walking or lying down. So try to keep on grounding yourself in those main postures. When you walk from one place to another, if you have to adjust your coat or zip your coat up, for example, do that in a standing posture. Don't try to walk and do something else. Do something with your hands, for example, at the same time. So that helps our awareness of daily activities. So now it's already past 4:30. And I suggest that we finish now, and then you should probably, if the organizers don't mind, come back to sit at 5:15 instead of 5 o'clock, because it's already 4:30 and you don't have much time to have your juice and walk or take a shower. So that's my suggestion. So let's finish for now by reciting the Mahasatipatthana Sutta.